Hi there. I hope the sound is coming through all right. It's a little bit windy here at the beach. I'm in Ventura, just finished work. So I walked down. I work at City Hall here in Ventura. And so I just finished work and walked down. And now with daylight savings time, I can walk. It's nice and sunny for a long time. And beginning last week, I actually started going for a swim after work down south of the pier. Usually in the water by about 6 p.m., which is kind of nice. And it's still a little bit chilly, but not so chilly that I can't really enjoy it. You know, it's funny how you kind of lose that vlogger sense. You know, I used to be so easy to do this, and you know, out of practice. So, and then if you're out of practice enough, it you need like a catalyst to do it, to get the momentum back up. I remember in Japan, it was so easy just to walk. Someone was commenting last week to me about how they had watched a video of mine where I was walking somewhere, and I knew, you know, I walked a lot of places in Japan, but most likely I was walking back from the school that I worked at back home, and it was just so automatic and so easy to make those videos. But you know, it's also it's not that I don't have much to say. Maybe it's more of a modesty, or what's the word? Not reservation, but kind of like a circumspect nature. To be a little more hesitant about that. Also, maybe it's partially because I feel like I've got everything out that I was ever going to say, you know, in the book, which I happened to break out because I thought I would read just a snippet from it. But mostly the reason I started this video was to show you the book that I'm reading right now, which is this, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek. Wow, I wonder if I can get a snapshot. Here we go. No, that just changes the camera. I would love to get a snapshot of that because I want to use that for the cover. But, you know, I read a lot. But it's been a long time since a book has struck me like this. Hi, Ron. It's nice talking to you the other night. Well yourself. Ron, have you read this? I think I was, didn't I take a photo of it and send it to you? I think I did. If that's my friend Ron out there in Israel. Yeah, I did. Well, gosh darn it. It's just that good. So I typically keep a yellow marker with me. This is a really good marker. It's very almost fluorescent, and it's got a nice little tip on it. Although I don't necessarily appreciate that angled tip. Can't quite figure it out exactly. I'm sure if some of the designers showed me how to use it, I'd be able to use it right. But typically it does look like a stick light. Typically I use it and I just mark bits and pieces. Now in particular, I set off about a year ago searching for books that I was wondering if there were others out there who saw in nature what I didn't. You know, strange play on words there. You know, the great indifference, the emptiness, the nothing out there in nature. And so I got this book called Solitude by, I can't quite remember her name. Almost, it's on the tip of my tongue. Did I reference the book in here? I may have added it to the list of references. Hold on just a second, let me see. No, I didn't. Anyway, in that book, she happened to reference a number of books that were good books to read on solitude. More particularly, what I was interested in was the writings of people who had spent a lot of time alone in nature, and what it is they might have encountered. And by the way, how's the audio quality, Ron? Am I coming through clearly? This was one of the books that she referenced, Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, which I bought. It's good. Oh, thank you, Ayaba. Oh, it's great. Very good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you for the feedback. I got this, and I wasn't so sure. The Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, it didn't jump out at me. But I just a couple of pages in, and I realized that this was somebody that saw a lot of what I didn't. Again, the play on words. You can just know by the amount of yellow. Just turn anywhere you go, just tons and tons of yellow. This is how I mark a whole section, if a whole section is worth looking at. And especially this chapter here on fecundity, which I just finished over the weekend. It was a very, very heavy, good chapter. Let me just see if I can pick something out. I just love this. Sometimes just little bits. What are the marked parts? That's a great question. I don't think I actually explained that. The marked parts, initially, usually I use marker to mark the parts just that I like, but in this book, I'm marking the parts where she was describing something, and she wrote this book. She published in 1975, so I was just 9 years old at the time. So long before I wrote anything, or at least I'm writing anything other than crayons. This is where she wrote stuff that I could relate to, that later would appear in my own book, right? The same concepts, things like this, right? I could see the pagan stars. Just something about that, the pagan stars, the unholy stars. Here's a good one. The same fixity, and she has a lot of words that I'd never heard. I have to look it up. I didn't know what fixity meant. Fixity means like an unchanging quality and some sort of nature that doesn't. So it says right here, the same fixity that collapses stars and drives the mantis to devour her mate eased these creatures together before my eyes. And her essays, this book is a series of essays, and they're very much laid out like Thoreau's Walden, which she references Thoreau frequently throughout the book. In fact, I'll find a spot right here. She references Thoreau in this chapter, I think it is. No, it's in the next chapter, which I'm getting near the end of the book, unfortunately. And she references the Bible a lot, like this chapter coming up that I haven't read yet, The Horns of the Altar. That's definitely a biblical reference right there. And, if it wasn't for my own Bible study, I wouldn't know that. So where's the bit about Thoreau? Thoreau has this one passage in Walden where he talks about he had three chairs in his cabin in Walden Pond. One for solitude, two for company, and three for society. And here, let me find it. Just a little further. She references that. The wind. Kurt, have you ever done mushrooms or DMT? I believe it's okay to talk about as long as it's not promoting it. As someone whose outlook is very much like yours, I can say it's quite something enlightening. Rich words, I will probably need a dictionary, right? Yes, Ron, I think you will. I need one. I'm looking it up all the time. Urine. No, I've never done mushrooms. Never done any drugs at all. Although I must say, reading this book, one of the very first things I did was I had to look it up to see, did Annie Dillard do drugs? Because I was thinking if drugs are going to inspire some sort of writing, this must be the type of writing that it must inspire. Oh, I can't seem to find it. But anyway, I just marked it. I thought I marked it this morning. Anyway, she definitely refers to Thoreau. Let's see if there's anything else. See, the problem is that I can't read some of these You have to read the whole chapter, because she plants seeds throughout the book, and then she refers back to the seeds, and if you don't read the whole book, the bits don't mean so much. She talks a lot about death too, which is a common, it's an illusion, not an illusion, but an allusion in my book. I refer to death a lot as well. In the open, I like that. In the open, anything might happen. I don't come to the creek for sky unmediated. Let me see. Let me find that piece. Can you read a chapter? Why not? Here we go. This is the chapter on fecundity. Now, actually, let me read the chapter that I'm reading right now, which is the chapter about nightfall. She talks about going to a cabin, which reminded me a lot. It's called Night Watch. Reminded me a whole lot of finding the empty cabins in Japan. Here we go, Night Watch. Chapter, I won't know if I'll read the whole chapter, but I'll read a bit of it from Annie Dillard. I stood in the Lucas meadow in the middle of a barrage of grasshoppers. There must have been something about the rising heat, the falling night, the ripeness of grasses, something that mustered this army in the meadow where they have never been in such legions before. I must have seen 1,000 grasshoppers, alarums and excursions clicking over the clover knee-high to me. I had stepped into the meadow to feel the heat and catch a glimpse of the sky, but these grasshoppers demanded my attention and became an event in themselves. Every step I took detonated the grass. A blast of bodies like shrapnel exploded around me. The air burst and whirred. There were grasshoppers of all sizes, grasshoppers yellow, green, and black, short-horned, long-horned, slant-faced, band-winged, spur-throated, cone-headed, pygmy, spotted, striped, and bared. They sprang in salvos, dropped in the air, and clung unevenly to stems and blades, with their legs spread for balance as redwings ride cattail reeds. They clattered about my ears. They ricocheted off my calves with an instant clutch and release of tiny legs. I was in shelter, but open to the sky. The meadow was clean, the world new, and I washed by my walk over the waters of the dam. A new wild feeling descending upon me and caught me up. What if these grasshoppers were locusts, I thought? What if the first man in the world? What if I were the first man in the world and stood in a swarm? Now let me just set the setting. She wrote this book in a place called Tinker Creek in I think it's in North Carolina, and she has a little cottage by the creek, and she makes excursions out into the creek, which is totally quite civilized. There's neighbors around, there's kids, there's kids who ride motorbikes through the woods, so it's quite civilized. But she goes out there nevertheless and has these incredible glimpses with the emptiness and the world and nature and these profound thoughts, some of the profoundest thoughts, and she relates these. In this particular one, she's talking about how old was she when she was writing Exploring. She was 29 years old when she wrote this book, and she won the friggin' Pulitzer Prize for it, for nonfiction literature. Anyway, in this particular chapter, she's taking her sleeping bag, and all by herself, she's crossing the creek, Tinker Creek, into the meadow across the way, where she's going to spend the night. Now I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, literary fan up there. I'm going to skip ahead because the next bit is about locust, and it's pretty heavy duty. Now there's 2 of them. Now here she is. She's returning. She's got finished talking about the locust. Okay, so I'll skip ahead. Now, so imagine she's got her sleeping bag. She's crossed over the little dam in the creek. She's entering this meadow. Here we go. Now, returning from my foray, and in a page, I'm going to get into a heavy-duty section, a whole lot of yellow coming up. Now, returning from my foray into the grasshopper meadow, I was back where I started, on the bank that separates the cottage from the top of the dam, where my sleeping bag, foam pad, and sandwich lay. The sun was setting invisibly behind the cliff's rim. I unwrapped the sandwich and looked back over the way I had come, as if I could have seen the grasshoppers spread themselves again over the wide meadow and hide enfolded in its thickets and plush. This is what I had come for. Just this, and nothing more. A fling of leafy motion on the cliffs, the assault of real things, living and still, with shapes and powers under the sky. This is my city, my culture, and all the world I need. I looked around. What I call the Lucas place is only a part of the vast Lucas property. It is one of the earliest clearings around here, a garden in the wilderness. Every time I cross the dam and dry my feet on the bank, I feel like I've just been born. Now, to my right, the creek's dammed waters were silent and deep, overhung by and reflecting bankside tulip and pawpaw and ash. The creek angled away out of sight upstream. This is where the oxbow and the dam spanned its sharpest arc. Downstream, the creek slid over the dam and slapped along sandstone ledges and bankside boulders, exhaling a cooling breath of mist before disappearing around the bend under the steep wooded cliff. We're getting there. Imagine she's there, she's crossed over, she's in the meadow all by herself. Evening is coming on, she intends to stay the night. There's a deserted cabin. Picture Thoreau. By the way, this is the section where she references Thoreau. I stood ringed and rimmed in heights, locked and limed in a valley within a valley. Next to the cliff fell a grassy series of high terraces, suitable for planting, the hanging gardens of Babylon. Beyond the terraces, forest erupted again wherever it could eke out a root hold on the sheer vertical rock. In one place, 3 caves cut into the stone vaults, their entrances hidden by honeysuckle. One of the caves was so small, only a child could enter it crawling. One was big enough to explore long after you have taken the initiatory turns that shut out the light. The third was huge and shallow, filled with cut wood and chicken wire, and into its nether wall extended another tiny cave in which a groundhog reared her litter this spring. Ahead of me, in the distance, I could see where the forested cliffs mined with caves gave way to overgrown terraces that once must have been cleared. Now they were tangled in saplings, swathed in honeysuckle and wild rose brambles. I always remember trying to fight my way up that steepness one winter when I understood that even January, and I love this, here's the yellow bit, when I first understood that even January is not muscle enough to subdue the deciduous south. Wow! There were clear trails through the undergrowth. I saw once I was in the thick of it, but they were rabbit paths, unfit for anyone over 7 inches tall. I had emerged scathed, pricked, and panting in the Lucas peach orchard, which is considerably more conveniently approached by the steep gravel drive that parallels the creek. In the flat at the center of this rim rock was the sunlit grasshopper meadow, and facing the meadow, tucked up between the grass terrace and the creek's dam, was the heart of the city, the Lucas cottage. Okay, here's where we get into it. Her description of the cottage. I stepped to the porch. My footfall resounded. The cliffs rang back to the sound, and the clover and grasses absorbed it. The Lucas cottage was in fact mostly porch, airy and winged. Gray painted 2x4s wobbled about 3 sides of the cottage, split, smashed, and wrapped long past plumb. Warped long past plumb. Beams at the porch's 4 corners supported a low, peaked roof that vaulted over both the porch and the cottage impartially, lending so much importance to the already huge porch that it made the cottage proper seem an afterthought, as Adam sometimes seems an afterthought in Eden. For years, an old inlaid chess table was with a broken carved pedestal leaned against the cottage on one wing of the porch. Contrasting brown patches of weathered inlay curled up in curves like leaves. The cottage was scarcely longer than the porch was deep. It was a one-room cottage. You could manage. I've thought this through and through again. Let me say that part again. The cottage was scarcely longer than the porch was deep. It was a one-room cottage. You could manage. I've thought this through again and again, building more Spartan mansions of my soul. A cot, a plank, window desk, a chair. 2 for company, as the man says. There's the Thoreau reference. And some narrow shelves. The cottage is mostly windows. There are 5, and the windows are entirely broken, so that my life inside the cottage is mostly Tinker Creek and mud, dauber wasps. It's a great life, luxurious really. The cottage is wired for electricity. A bare bulb socket hangs from the unfinished wood ceiling. There is a stovepipe connection in the roof, beyond the porch, on the side away from the creek, and a big brick fireplace suitable for grilling whole steers. The steers themselves are fattened just 5 minutes away up the hill and down into the pasture. The trees that shade the cottage are walnuts and pecans. In the spring, the edge of the upstream creek just outside the cottage porch comes up in yellow daffodils all the way up the peach orchard. I'm going to stop there. It's funny. Isn't it funny how whenever you share something that is special, if you share it explicitly, it doesn't always come out quite the way you want. For some reason, the passages the words just don't come out reading it that way. That's a skill I'd like to get, a skill to be able to read, very good writing to share. I do a better job of listening when I read it aloud, but there's something also about reading inside the mind. Now I'm going to finish with just a little, but trust me, it's really a good book. Yeah, Ron, it really is really good. I don't think I'm doing it justice. And, there's parts. Maybe I'll read more of it tomorrow. Maybe I'll start from the beginning tomorrow. I'm going to read a little bit of my own book and then I'm going to finish. Okay, I'm going to read this part right here. This is from Going Alone. And this, by the way, this is the last copy of the first edition. I've got a new edition, the second edition, and Jessica, if you're out there, you've got the very first one with the new cover. So you've got second edition number 1. This is the last edition of the first edition. What? Here we go. This is from the chapter My Muse is a Corpse. Such a pleasant title. I was asked today by a friend about my thoughts on the topic of worthwhile employ. Should the best occupation yield leisure and option to my heirs? Provide a catapult and catalyst to the next generation's situation and state? At the time I was asked, I thought such an aim both worthy and admirable. But upon some reflection I see now little good in laying up my days against the improvement of my heirs. For if the better aim of virtue is a mature capacity of wisdom, enlivened with fortitude, made lean with and impervious of apathy, and grave of self-control, then how much better to offer our heirs, instead of wealth, the worthy example of our well-born poverty, and the steady resolve and still motion of a body and mind at peace with self-control. Very simple, old idea. I can give my daughter wealth and riches in inheritance to buttress and temper her against the cold winds of the world, or maybe it's not an and or, maybe I can give them both, or maybe the example of someone who is able to weather those cold winds with a bemused smile, perhaps, and a temperate grin, and a countenance of chagrin in spite of the pain, right up to the end. I listen every when I commute back and forth. This is a whole video about literature. Not that I rank my own work in that category, but at least with regard to Annie Dillard and now Ralph Waldo Emerson, I always listen to twice a week in its entirety Ralph Waldo Emerson's Self-Reliance, and I listened to it on the way up this morning to work from start to finish. It takes about an hour and a quarter to listen to it. I listen to it. It's a liver box recording that I listen to on YouTube. And marvel at his description of how the aspect we wear on our face of the life that we choose to live, that we can't hide that. It takes on, as he describes, an asinine picture of whatever compromise or fear that we may have, and that we acquiesce to. How much better an example to, instead of giving my daughter the means to prevent that challenge, give her the example of a father who has attempted to live well and virtuous in spite of that. And not that I'm a success at that, but I'm trying my best. And with that, I'll go ahead and sign off, because it's time for me to go get my fish and chips. Monday is fish and chips night. I'm going to go down to the pier down there, have my fish and chips. Well read, anxiety reduced. Thanks, yabba dabba doo. Oh, you're very welcome. I'm delighted if any anxiety has been reduced. That may mean, if that's been the case, and I've had even the slightest bit of an aid in that, then you, my friend, yabba dabba doo friend, are motivating me to do this more often. But what better end could there possibly be in this life than to spend a little quality time with my friends? Oh, I just got a message. Somebody's coming up to see me right now. Thanks. Literally, I just got a message. A friend of mine down there is going to come see me. A friend of mine from college is going to come up and see me at 8:30. So good. So I guess I'll go and... Is that Chuck? Is that another friend from college? I'm going to be Chuck friends. No, I'm not going to go. Natalie, I'm not going to go eat fish and chips because my friend is coming to see me. Maybe I'll grab him and we'll go see some fish and chips, or eat some fish and chips. Anyway, somebody said I'm going to read that last comment and then I'll sign off. You didn't know your readings are reduced in stress? I didn't know that, Ron. Do my readings reduce stress and anxiety? If that's the case, then I'm going to do this a lot. Hey, listen to this. You watch my videos from YouTube, from Siberia, it's the same 4 blasts. Listen. 4, 3 long, 1 short. Listen. Can you hear it? It's gonna short. But there's something about it. The whistle blasts at Siberia that are this sonorous tone that you just don't have here. It's just too domesticated. No, Ron, yes, you guys hear it? It's not the train that passes Siberia, but it's the same railroad, the Burlington Northern Southern Santa Fe. Short. See, it's the same one, and I'm just struck by how civilization removes the sound. If you listen to any of my what is it called, the Stoic poetry videos, it's got that train whistle on the end, and it's totally soiled here. Every time I hear it, I'm like, no, it's got to go to the wild to hear it. You got to go. Well, why not? Okay, I'm going to sign off, everybody. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks for the the encouraging feedback that maybe stress reduction. I'll read some more. Take care. Bye-bye. Make it a good night. Be safe, but not too safe and all that. Bye-bye.